Okay, guys, this is part 2 of our biodiversity research project. So part 2 is comparing the biodiversity value of Edison High School and comparing it to Fresno County. The point is to see which hypothesis is correct. So you should have read this little section here, but just as a reminder, we have two separate hypotheses: the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. So we're using a prop 2 Z-test. This is going to give us a value called a Z, which we're going to convert into a probability number called a p-value. So what the p-value is the probability that these two separate samples are the same. So the higher the p-value means the more likely they are the same. The lower means the more likely that they are not the same, that it wasn't by probability or chance that these numbers are similar. Okay, so we're going to open up this document that you worked on for the last section. I put in some fake data here. This isn't the d-value you calculated, but I'm just using it for the example. So you should have a different d-value than me based on your last calculation, the last section. So now I'm going to click the tab that says statistical analysis. And this is super simple. All you have to do is take the two d-values and enter them into this formula. So I'm going to copy the Edison, and I'm pasting the number. I'm going to copy the Fresno County, and I'm going to paste the number. Okay, so I've entered in the proportion. So the d-value we calculated is technically a proportion. So that's why we're using the Z-test. So now I'm going to enter in the sample size. So for Edison, this was our sample size. Oops. And here's our sample size for Fresno County. Okay, so what you can see automatically happens is all this equations are happening. And over here, this last value, this is the p-value. Okay, so my p-value is at 0, which means that with 100% guarantee, I can tell you that these two samples are not by chance similar, they are statistically different. So if I was analyzing this data, so let's say this was my data, my p-value is, like it says here, less than 0.05. That means we reject our null hypothesis and accept our alternative. So in this scenario, because my p-value was less than 0.05, I reject this null hypothesis here, meaning my alternative is true, that Edison High School and Fresno County do not have the same amount of insect biodiversity. Okay, so just to get an idea, especially for those of you who are not in statistics, of how this works, I'm going to mess up these numbers a little bit. So let's say that Edison High School's was actually the same as Fresno County, or close, and it was 86. So now we see my p-value has changed to 0.75. So it is no longer below 0.05. So now I would say that these are not statistically different, meaning that the first hypothesis is true, that they have the same amount of insect biodiversity. And looking at these numbers, that makes logical sense. We see that these proportions are just about the same, so it makes sense that our p-value is telling us, yeah, these are probably the same. So once again, it's all the difference so between these. So let's say I just change it a little bit. So I just go to 75. Once again, we see that p-value has gone down. Based on this information, it's saying that this is most likely, probability-wise, 2 different data set numbers. Okay, so that is how you can finish your calculating. So make sure you get the correct D's put in here, and that will give you your p-value. You'll use that value to determine whether or not Edison's biodiversity is the same as Fresno County, or if the alternative hypothesis is true. Okay, don't forget that this is all stuff you are going to be including in your lab report. Okay, good luck.